My name is Elizabeth, I am 34 years old, and for the longest time I believed that surviving something was the same as living through it. I know now that those two things are nothing alike. Surviving is what you do when someone else is holding the wheel. Living, actually living, is what happens when you finally reach over, grab it with both hands and refuse to let go. This is my story, all of it. The parts that made me want to disappear, the parts that made me fight, and the one unexpected truth that changed everything I thought I knew about love, betrayal, and the people who are supposed to protect you. I grew up in a house that looked perfect from the outside. A 2-story home in a quiet neighborhood in Virginia, rose bushes along the front walk, a mother who wore pearls to the grocery store and a father who shook every neighbor's hand with a firm grip and a wide smile. We were the family other families pointed to. The Hargroves, people would say, with this little note of admiration in their voice, like just being near us might rub off on them somehow. I was their only daughter. The centerpiece of everything they built. And for most of my childhood, I genuinely did not understand that being someone's centerpiece is not the same as being loved. My parents had an image. That image required specific things: a certain neighborhood, a certain church, a certain circle of friends, a certain kind of daughter. I was enrolled in violin at 5, French at 7, etiquette classes at 10. I was told what to wear, how to speak, who to sit beside at dinner parties. I was not unhappy exactly. I didn't have the language for what I was not yet. I just knew that there was a version of me my parents needed me to be, and the real me, the one who wanted to study literature, who stayed up reading novels under her covers with a flashlight, who cried at thunderstorms not from fear, but from some private feeling she couldn't name. That version was never quite invited to the table. My father's name is Robert. My mother's name is Diane. I want you to hold those names because this story is not just about me. It is about them, about what people are capable of when status and pride become more important than the child they brought into the world. By the time I was in college, I had learned to split myself in two. There was the Elizabeth my parents saw, obedient, poised, careful, and there was the Elizabeth who existed in the margins, who had deep friendships and messy feelings and a journal she kept locked in the bottom drawer of her dorm desk. I was studying English literature at a small college in North Carolina, and for the first time in my life, I felt something close to freedom. I had a professor, an older woman named Dr. Whitmore, who told me my writing had soul. That was the first time anyone had ever said that anything about me had soul. I nearly cried right there in her office. And then, the summer before my junior year, my parents called me home. I remember the night they told me. We were sitting in the formal dining room. They always used the formal dining room for difficult conversations, as if the good china might cushion the blow. My father had his hands folded on the table. My mother was holding her wine glass the way she always did when she was nervous, like it might float away if she let go. "We've arranged something," my father said, "for your future." His name was Stuart Aldridge. He was 29 to my 20 years, the son of my father's oldest business partner, a man named Harold Aldridge who had been my father's college roommate and closest ally for 30 years. Harold's company and my father's company had been doing business together since before I was born, and apparently they had been building toward this moment for a long time. The marriage of their children would merge two family businesses, secure a contract worth millions, and, as my father put it, with the kind of calm that made my skin crawl, set our family up for generations. I said no, clearly, loudly, and with what I thought was unmistakable finality. My mother cried. My father went very still in the way he did when he was deciding which version of himself to use next. Then he told me that if I did not agree, my tuition would be cut off, my college fund gone, the car they paid for gone, any hope of their support, financial or otherwise, gone. And more than that, he told me that he had already spoken to Stuart, had already made promises to Harold, and that my refusal would cost him not just a contract but a friendship that predated my existence. He looked me in the eye and said, "You owe us this, Elizabeth." I was 20 years old. I had $63 in my personal checking account. I did not know how to fight that, not yet. So I married Stuart Aldridge on a Saturday in October, in the same church my parents had gotten married in, wearing a dress my mother had chosen, with flowers I had never seen before and a guest list I had not been consulted on, in front of 200 people who applauded when the minister announced us husband and wife. I remember standing there, holding Stuart's hand, thinking, this is the last day of my life as I knew it. I was right. I just didn't know yet that I meant it in more ways than one. Stuart was not a violent man. I want to be careful here because I know people expect a certain kind of story when a woman says she was forced into marriage. There were no bruises, there was no screaming. What there was instead was something harder to name and harder to prove, a slow, complete erasure. Stuart had grown up watching his own mother disappear into the role of perfect wife, and he had absorbed the lesson perfectly. He didn't need to shout. He just needed to make me feel, every single day, that my thoughts were inconvenient, my feelings were excessive, my wants were childish, and my presence in his life was a business arrangement that I should be grateful for. He would talk over me at dinner parties. He would cancel plans I made without telling me. He handled all of our finances and gave me an allowance at 21 years old with a detailed accounting of what it could and could not be spent on. He told me once that the reason I wasn't happy was because I thought too much, and that if I would just stop overanalyzing everything, life would be simpler. He said it gently. He always said everything gently. That was somehow the worst part. My parents thought we were wonderful. They saw us at family dinners and holiday gatherings and charity events, and they saw exactly what Stuart presented, a handsome, successful man and his pleasant, composed wife. They never saw the version of me that sat alone in the bathroom at night with the fan on so he couldn't hear me cry. They never saw the journal I started keeping again, not because I wanted to write beautifully anymore, but because I needed somewhere to put the truth. Somewhere it wouldn't be corrected or dismissed. 4 years into the marriage, something shifted in me. I couldn't tell you exactly what triggered it. There was no single moment, no dramatic incident. It was more like a tide coming in so slowly you don't notice until suddenly the water is at your chin. I was 24, sitting in a coffee shop, waiting for a friend to arrive, and I overheard 2 women at the table next to me talking. One of them was crying softly, and the other had her hand over hers, and she was saying, "You deserve to want things, that's not being selfish, that's being alive." I don't know those women. I will never know them. But I wrote what that woman said in my journal that night, and I read it every day for a week straight until it stopped feeling like something someone else said, and started feeling like something I had always known and forgotten. I began planning, quietly, carefully, the way you do when you know that the wrong move at the wrong moment could close doors you'll need later. I got a part-time job, a small thing, helping at a local bookshop a few afternoons a week, which Stuart had agreed to with barely concealed condescension, the way you might let a child have a harmless hobby. What he didn't know was that every paycheck went into a separate account I opened at a bank across town. I didn't touch it, I let it grow. I also quietly began reaching back out to Dr. Whitmore from college. She had retired from teaching but was still writing, and she remembered me warmly. She became, over the course of many careful emails, the first person I told the truth to. All of it. She didn't flinch. She didn't tell me I was being dramatic or that I should try harder to make it work. She said, "Elizabeth, the door you're looking for is already inside you. You just need to stop letting other people tell you it doesn't exist." I found a therapist. I paid for it in cash from the bookshop money. I told Stuart I was joining a book club on Tuesday afternoons. Every Tuesday for 8 months, I sat across from a woman named Dr. Fiona Parks, and I said out loud the things I had only written in journals. It was the hardest and most necessary thing I had ever done. She helped me understand something crucial, that what had been done to me had a name, that it wasn't weakness that had kept me there. That rebuilding is not the same as starting over. It is harder and more real and more worth it. By the time I was 26, I had enough saved to cover first and last month's rent on a small apartment across town, a few months of expenses, and a lawyer's consultation fee. I had also, in those months of careful observation, begun to notice something strange about the business between my father and Harold Aldridge. It started with a document I wasn't supposed to see. Stuart had left his laptop open one afternoon. He was rarely careless, which is why the moment stood out, and on the screen was an email chain between him and his father Harold that referenced the arrangement and ours cut, and something called the secondary account. I didn't understand it then. I took a photo on my phone and told myself I would figure it out later. I had more immediate things to focus on. I left Stuart on a Tuesday in March. I had arranged it down to the hour. My bags were at the bookshop. My lawyer had already filed the initial paperwork. Dr. Parks knew my plan. Dr. Whitmore was the one who answered the phone when I called from the parking lot of a gas station 20 minutes after walking out the door, shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. She said, "You did it, Elizabeth, now just drive." I drove. The divorce itself was long and unpleasant. Stuart's family had more lawyers than I had dollars. But I had something they hadn't accounted for: documentation, 8 years of journal entries dated and detailed, a therapist willing to provide a professional account, and the photo of that email, which my own lawyer told me was worth pursuing. That email, it turned out, was the edge of something very large and very dark. My father, the man with the firm handshake and the rose bushes and the image he had spent his whole life curating, had not arranged my marriage simply out of old-fashioned values or family loyalty. He had arranged it because Harold Aldridge had something on him. A 20-year-old financial arrangement that had started as a small favor and grown, through compounding dishonesty, into something that could have destroyed my father's business and reputation if it had ever come to light. Harold had been holding that information over my father for years, and the marriage, my body, my future, was the price my father had paid to keep Harold quiet, to keep the secret safe, to keep the image intact. I was the currency of my father's silence. When my lawyer explained this to me, I sat very still for a long time. I remember the light in his office, the way it came through the blinds in long pale stripes across the carpet. I remember thinking, I always knew somewhere that it was about more than tradition. I just never let myself believe it could be this. My father had sold me. Not with malice in his heart, maybe. I have thought about this so many times, and I genuinely believe he told himself it was for the best, that Stuart was a good man, that I would learn to be happy, that the alternative was worse. People are extraordinarily good at building stories that make their worst choices sound like sacrifices. But the truth, stripped of every justification, was simple and brutal. He had traded me for his own security, and my mother had let him, and neither of them had ever, not once, asked me what I wanted. The legal proceedings that followed were complicated, and I will not bore you with every detail. What I will tell you is that the information we uncovered, with the help of a forensic accountant my lawyer brought in, led to an investigation into Harold Aldridge's company, which led to discoveries that had nothing to do with my father and everything to do with Harold's own conduct over several decades. Harold Aldridge, the man my father had protected, the man whose son I had been married off to, turned out to be the one with the most to hide. The arrangement my father had been so desperate to conceal was, in the end, far less damning than what Harold had done independently. My father had been protecting a man who had been using that protection as cover. When I met with my father, the one meeting I agreed to in a neutral location with my lawyer present, he looked smaller than I had ever seen him. The handshake was gone. The image was cracking at the seams. He started to speak and I stopped him. I told him that I was not there to give him absolution, and I was not there to destroy him either. I was there to say one thing, that I knew everything, that I had documented everything, and that the only reason I was not pursuing further legal action against him, personally, was because what I wanted was not revenge. What I wanted was my life back, and I was taking it. I saw my mother cry that day, not the pearl and wine glass kind of crying she did to manipulate, real crying, ugly crying. She reached for my hand across the table and I let her hold it for a moment because I am not made of stone, and because she was my mother, and because some grief is too complicated for either anger or forgiveness to fully contain. I did not tell her I forgave her. I did not tell her I hated her. I told her that I hoped she would spend the rest of her life thinking about what it cost a daughter to be a tool. She never stopped crying. Here is the thing about reclaiming your life that no one tells you. It is not triumphant, not at first. People imagine it as this burst of sunlight, this sudden freedom, and sometimes it is, sometimes there are moments of pure, clean joy that take your breath away. But mostly in the beginning, it just feels like standing in a room that used to be full of furniture and noticing how loud your own footsteps are. I was 26 years old with an apartment, a settlement from the divorce, and no blueprint. The blueprint I had been handed at birth, the one with the proper house and the proper husband and the proper image, was gone. And the one I had imagined for myself at 18, the one with the literature degree and the writing and the something that had soul, I had to find the edges of it again, carefully, the way you find your way in a dark room by touch. I went back to school, not to finish the degree I had left that felt like going backward, but to start something new. I enrolled in a writing program at a university in New York. It was terrifying and small and right. I moved into an apartment so tiny my bed was 3 steps from my kitchen, and if I stretched my arms out fully in the bathroom I could touch both walls. I thought it was the most beautiful apartment I had ever seen. In that writing program, I met people who had come from things. Not all of them had stories like mine, but all of them had weight, the kind of weight that comes from living honestly, from letting the real stuff accumulate instead of sweeping it behind a polished surface. We sat around tables and read each other's words and did not flinch. For the first time in my adult life, I was in a room where flinching was not required. I started writing the thing I had been carrying for 6 years. Not as a memoir exactly, I wasn't sure yet what shape it would take, but as a reckoning. Long, honest, unglamorous pages about a girl who was handed to someone else and what it cost her, and what she found on the other side of that cost. My professor, a quiet man named Professor Aldous, who had the kind of eyes that made you feel he had already lived 17 lives, read an early draft and told me, "There is a reader somewhere who needs this story more than you know." I thought about that for a long time, about who that reader might be, about all the daughters sitting in formal dining rooms with good china and full wine glasses and fathers whose hands were folded on the table, waiting for the moment that would change everything. The book was published 3 years ago. I was 31. It is not a bestseller in the traditional sense. It did not make any lists, but the letters, oh, the letters. From women who recognized themselves in my pages, from daughters who had given up things they loved to be what someone else needed them to be, from one woman in particular, a 73-year-old grandmother in Tennessee who wrote me 2 handwritten pages to tell me that she had done to her own daughter what my parents had done to me, and that reading my book was the first time she had been able to see it clearly, and that she had called her daughter for the first time in 11 years. That letter sat on my desk for a month. I picked it up and put it down a dozen times, and every time I thought about the 2 women in the coffee shop. You deserve to want things, that's not being selfish, that's being alive. Someone said that in front of a stranger, not knowing who was listening, and look what it started. My relationship with my parents now is not warm. I will not romanticize it into something it isn't. My father has retired. Harold Aldridge's company did not survive the investigation. Stuart remarried quickly and I heard he is happy, which I mean genuinely. I hold no anger for him. He was a product of what he was taught, same as all of us. The difference is in what we do when we learn better. My mother calls me on my birthday. We talk for about 20 minutes. She does not wear pearls to the grocery store anymore. She told me that once, and I think she thought it would mean something to me, that small act of self-dismantling, and I suppose it does. I suppose it tells me that even people who have done enormous damage can, in small and insufficient ways, begin to undo it. That is not absolution. It is just truth. I am 34 now. I live in a real apartment, not a tiny one. I have a cat named Bernard who knocks things off shelves and shows no remorse, and I love him with a completeness I find slightly embarrassing. I teach a writing workshop on Wednesday evenings for women in transition, women leaving difficult situations, women starting over, women who need somewhere to put the truth. We sit in a circle in a rented room above a bookshop. We read each other's words and we do not flinch. Last week, a woman in the workshop, she is 22, and she came in the first night looking like she was deciding every 30 seconds whether to stay or run, read a paragraph she had written about her own mother, about how loving someone and being hurt by them can happen at the same time in the same body without one cancelling out the other. When she finished reading, the room was very quiet. Then someone across the circle said softly, "Yes, that is exactly right." And the 22-year-old looked up, and for a moment she looked like a person who had just found out she was not alone. That moment, that is why I am still here. That is why I wrote every word, said every hard thing, walked through every room that felt too empty and every feeling that felt too large, not for my parents to understand, not for Stuart to apologize, not for Harold Aldridge or the lawyers or the contract or the merger or any of the machinery that was built out of my silence, for that 22-year-old, for the grandmother in Tennessee. For whoever is out there right now sitting in a formal dining room with good china on the table, and a father whose hands are folded, and a life they didn't choose closing in around them. I want you to hear me say it, the way someone once said it, where I could hear it without knowing they were saying it to me. You deserve to want things, not someday. Not when it's convenient, not when you've earned it by suffering enough or being good enough or making everyone comfortable enough. Now, you deserve it right now. The door isn't outside you. It has never been outside you. It is inside, and it has been there the whole time, and you can open it. I know that some of you reading this will say I was lucky to have found Dr. Parks, lucky to have had Dr. Whitmore, lucky that the evidence existed, lucky that the truth came out. And yes, I was lucky in the way that luck finds people who are willing to move toward it even when they're terrified. I was also someone who spent 8 years accumulating the courage to use one afternoon well. Luck did not write those journals. Luck did not drive to the bank across town. Luck did not pick up the phone in the gas station, parking lot, shaking and dial a number. That was me, that has always been me. The girl who cried at thunderstorms for a reason she couldn't name, I think I know now what it was. She was mourning the version of herself that was always being asked to be smaller. She was grieving on behalf of her own future before she even knew there was anything to grieve. She was listening to the sound of something vast and uncontrollable and thinking, I want to feel that alive. I want to be that real. She got there, I got there. And if you are still finding your way, I promise with everything I have that the distance between where you are and where you can be is not as impossible as it feels from inside it. It just requires one decision, then another one after that. Small, deliberate, terrifying decisions made in gas station parking lots and empty bank lobbies and rented rooms above bookshops, until one day you look up and realize you are standing in the life that was always yours. Take it back, take all of it back. You were never meant to be anyone's arrangement. Edited to add, I am overwhelmed by the response to this. For everyone asking, yes, the book is real, yes, the workshop is real. No, I am not going to name my parents publicly. That is not what this is for. This is for you, it was always for you. Thank you for letting me tell it.